Greetings, everybody. We are at ARC Executive Forum Orlando. I'm here with Jay of Hexagon, Octave now,
Octave, yep.
and Chris of Audit. So welcome, everybody. Now,
Thank you.
Octave is being positioned around outcome of scale. So where do you see the biggest trust bottleneck today?
Whew. Great way to lead off the questioning. I'll give a little bit of history to it. So last year, the Hexagon company announced that they were going to spin off a software division, aptly named Octave. So we're bringing together a number of technologies that makes it a $1.5 billion in revenue as of 24 exit, about 7,500 people, 60 countries. We focus on helping to drive software solutions to help large industrial and built environment customers do what they do best. And that's designing great infrastructure, being able to build that, being able to operate, and being able to protect it. And so for us, one of the biggest opportunities is really helping them unleash that intelligence at scale, where you're bringing data together that in many ways are in silos and fractured today in the market.
So Chris, from the outside, what do you see?
So in terms of the bottlenecks, to your original question, I think this is what we try to address head on at AdLib. And working with the new Octave and your core EQ2 system, where we see a bottleneck is less the technology, and it's more around the provenance of the data. So can I trust the data? And so I think there's a lot of effort, people, process, and technology being thrown at how do I get to a point where I can trust the data? And I think what most of our customers are really asking for when they say AI, what they want is just intelligent data that they can take action on. And so to take action on it, they have to be able to trust it. So that appears to be the primary bottleneck is how do I get to a point where I can trust the data? And that's where, as Jay and I were talking right before we came on here, that's where AdLib plays pretty nicely is as almost like pre-processing of the data to create that accuracy layer as this complex data sort of needs to make its way into these core systems.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Now, we both play in multiple industries. Let's focus a little bit on the regulated environment and what breaks first when trying to scale AI and automation.
Hey, you want to start with that one, maybe?
What breaks first? So maybe one of the things that breaks first when you're trying to scale AI, and I think, again, one of the primary challenges to scaling AI is moving from experimental to scale. And to be able to do that, you've got to have like provenance on the data. Because in regulated industries, you've got to have auditable outcomes. And so you've got to be able to take the outcome, the data, and trace it all the way back to its original source. So that way, when you are going through an audit, you don't have your team stuck on trying to find out this data point links to this input. And so I would feel like that's probably the thing in regulated industries is making sure that you're set up for a clean audit.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that point. The traceability is essential. And you're going to look at lineage of data. You're going to look at it through a variety of sets of documents, how many times it's changed hands or changed, where it's origined from, because to your point, the output is potentially an audit. But you want to make sure that what you've built is the actual traceability of that through multiple documents, multiple individuals, multiple steps of the process. And if you can't get that right, then there's really no use to be using AI to actually then call against that information set. And so I would say, you rightly said is the ability to get that foundation clear because it makes it easier for us to use it from a quality and standards perspective when we look at solutions such as EQT or Reliance. So that's probably one of the greatest examples, but it also, even outside of regulated industries, is the absolute cornerstone for powering what you use in AI itself, because without that, you have just a clear view of context mismatch. You're hallucinating because you're not actually pulling against the right set of data or information. And so, I think it's applicable well beyond the regulated environments.
Yeah, and I think the seriousness and the gravity of regulated industries is not to be taken lightly. Dealing with like life and death type situations. So regulated industries for us is everything from life sciences, where we're doing clinical drug trials, to precision manufacturing, where we're helping ensure that every bolt on an aircraft or every design factor within chip fab is precision to like the operating procedures. And so to do that, you've got to be able to trust the data all the way through start to finish.
Yeah, and then just to give it a couple examples into some of the areas that we play in from public safety, When you're out having to deal with potentially an incident that's in the public environment, somebody gets hurt and you're calling 911 for help, and then having fire or healthcare EMS, rushing to support that, the lineage of all those activities is essential. One, to ensure that you have the right information at the right time for someone to take action, but two, the traceability, because the event doesn't stop there. You may have a significant situation thereafter that somebody might inquire on, or just knowing past history of events itself. So that is in the public safety point where it can't break, it has to work, and that traceability is huge. The other is perhaps when you're designing, as we're sitting in a very large hotel here, and the structural integrity of how this is put together, the efficacy of how that information comes together, whether it's a 3D drawing or the actual site survey of the physical environment or the permitting, being able to look through all this, because conditions do happen based in Florida. You could have a hurricane not too far off. So how do you understand as things change, always coming back to a trusted source of data, regulated or non-regulated industry, essential.
Now, thanks for the insights. Now, if you had to pick speed, accuracy, or auditability, what do customers say they want, and what do they actually require?
I've heard a couple different conversations in terms of speed and accuracy and trust. So one is speed of retrieval of information. So if you're daily tasked and you're trying to interact with environments very quickly, knowing that the data set itself is sound, it's coming from a corpus of information that you're pulling against, retrieval is quick, on the spot. So if an incident has occurred, say in a power plant, the retrieval of that information, but most importantly, the accuracy of that information has to happen. So I don't think in many of our customers it's a binary thing of I need speed versus accuracy. We need both, and it needs to be trusted. But then if you get into certain tasks that are less on critical field operating environments, there may be trade-offs, but it really hasn't been a disassociated question, I would say, for many of our customers.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Jay. I do think, though, customers initially say, I want speed, I've got to have this yesterday.
Yeah.
But what they really mean is that they need the auditability. And so, because, speed without accountability or auditability just leads to more rework.
Yeah. And risk. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think, that's absolutely right. So when they say, like, I want AI and I want it yesterday, they want actionable information that they can trust.
Yeah.
Therefore, they want to be able to mitigate the risk, they have to mitigate the risk of it. So I would say that sometimes they ask for speed, and the onus is on like a service provider to say, hear you, but it's probably velocity. So it's speed and direction.
Yeah.
It's not one without the other.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it needs to be built into the software that we deliver to our customers. So it has to be frictionless to provide that speed. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that we hit the risk of anything that's going to go wrong.
So you mentioned rework. What causes the file up? Double click on it.
A lot.
Stepped into that one.
Yeah. Well, I can go for one. So a lot of rework we have. So when we go from designing or helping our large construction leaders design for buildings as we're sitting in here, or a roadway or an airport, there's a tremendous amount of design change. And that can be a multitude of factors in terms of permitting, material availability, a redefinition of the actual site itself based on a condition of how it's been permitted. So these changes are constant. So we look at that as waste. And the ability where teams can collaborate much quicker on that is an ability to squeeze out potentially profitability and margin and more value to our customer. So I think that handoff waste equation, it is everywhere. I talked about it today in this productivity paradox, and it's not a wishful thinking. It's a reality. We've created data silos, data systems that are all fragmented. And what have we done? We put people in between them, and they became the interpreters of the information, which is just more work to reconcile. So that's one example of many that we face.
Where we see a lot of rework is, and I think we've probably both been around for a few AI innovation cycles. And so it seems like AI is being pushed from the top down. So boards and CEOs are pushing it down. You've got line of business leaders, presidents and GMs that are telling their teams to adopt AI. And they very much are, because they already have enterprise license agreements with the likes of say, a Microsoft or somebody like that. So it's easy enough for them to get access to these large language models. And so it feels like they're jumping into it.
Yep.
And since it's top down, they're investing a lot, and I would say downstream, the things that they're closest to, as opposed to understanding like what's the input source. So it's almost like the first principles of I need to make sure that what we're bringing into the organization I can trust before I throw money at the thing that's just nearest to me. And so that's where we try to do that accuracy layer on the front end, so that way everything's sort of like downstream from that and do trusting. And so we see a lot of rework because there's a lot of investment being thrown at these upstream systems, and they don't really take a look at the downstream. So that's where we can see a lot of rework sort of pile up.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll think about another question. I'm saying when you say this, push from the top, there's a fear of missing out. But what is the customer? What do you hear from a customer? What do they want when they say, I want AI? What do they mean, and what do they need or they believe they'll rely on?
Yeah, so my sense, I always try to take, I just mentioned like a first principle.
Yeah, same.
I think like why are they asking what they're asking for?
Yeah.
And you just mentioned the fear of missing out, and there absolutely is this race that my competitor is adopting it faster than me. They're going to be much more productive. They're going to be leaner. They're going to be faster. So I think all of those things being equal, what really matters is that you deliver this hyper-personalized experience that is spot on for your constituent base, for your customer.
Yeah.
So whatever that means, again, regulated or non-regulated industries, but delivering that hyper-personalized experience allows sort of like the AI, the technology, and all of the change management around it to sort of take care of itself.
Yeah. I mean, just building on your point, one thing that we've observed over the years, the patterns now, if you start with clarity around an outcome, the problem you're trying to solve, and be able to see that from a financial perspective and a process perspective, you can back into something. Then very clearly you can model, and you can look at what sort of data sources you need for that. And why this is important is that so many, to your point, like a board will say, we have to have AI initiatives and we're driving this. The fear is everyone's doing that, but you have all these pilots and you're not clear on, is it driving top line revenue, margin improvement, profitability for how you run as a customer? And so we spend time with our customers to really help them think in that first principles to say, okay, as a large EPC, what do you care about? You make 2 to 3.5 points of margin per project, always faced with the challenge of liquidated damages of running over schedule. So let's look at the input variables of that. Well, I've got time, I've got parts, I have labor. How am I constantly optimizing that with other variables that sit around, which could be weather, it could be permitting, could be a catastrophe that has occurred. All those things factor into how this actually manifests. And so part of this is, I would say, which I actually am very much enjoying, 25 years into it now, is this is sorry, in the sense of being able to ask these first principles questions of why does it have to be designed this way? Because if I know of all the past, it's been, we put all these systems in place and we're spending more time trying to commingle why these systems work together. That is absolutely the wrong way to look at it. Start fresh. If you had to design this business, what are the 5 questions that drive value for your business? Then work into where the data is, where the value is, where the environment is. So to me, it's almost like this curiosity. It's like a kid, the whys, where you kind of like, as your kids, okay, enough of the whys. But we need to be like that. And therefore, you can add more data to the problem. You get to secondary, tertiary level questions. And that's the power versus like, oh gosh, this just is regurgitating what I asked it and gave me an answer I think I already knew. So
it's so easy to just be overcome by all of this innovation that's coming at you. Like a new model coming out every day.
Yeah.
Every day there's a new model coming out.
It's commodity.
I just heard a conversation in the hallway that just, I was reminded of because of what you just said. And the conversation was, and I won't tell you who, but the conversation was, we need to stop cobbling together stuff. Because there's a race to just like adopt the next thing as opposed to thinking about like, what's the problem I'm really solving for?
Yeah.
And so I actually interrupted the conversation. I didn't know these people, but I could see the frustration. And part of just like being like a problem solver is like, I wanted to like de-escalate. And so I talked to them basically a value chain that we use to think through like how we can like best help our customers. And the value chain is basically, for us anyway, we're able to help normalize the data. Like that's the first thing that we do is we standardize. And we say like there's 300 file types, whether it's, we were talking about earlier, if there's a 3D CAD drawing or a simple PDF and everything in between, we can standardize that into one file type.
Yeah.
And then we do the data extraction.
Yeah.
Once we've normalized everything, then you can do the data extraction. As part of that normalization is complex images, and then you have the text.
Yeah.
So being able to like,
Yeah.
call that out.
Yeah.
And that's like the pre-processing piece of it. And then it goes into systems like
Yeah. Yeah.
run EQT. But then there's the post-processing,
Yeah.
which is then saying like, we need to add provenance to this data. So that way it's auditable, it's traceable, it has a chain of custody, that lineage that you were talking about earlier. So who touched it? What do they do to it? And when? And this sets up for auditability. So that way you've got the managers that are able to, when they're being audited, when they're being inspected, they can point to, as opposed to all of the rework that you were talking about earlier, they can quickly be able to point to, as opposed to a 3-week manual data call on how do we prove this out. But when I stepped into that mental model and that value chain, and it becomes like I can start to filter out the noise now, because that's what matters. At least that was my mental.
I agree. And the other thing that's really powerful to what you just said is it creates agency around the fact that with that data and then the procedures, or say the principles around what has to happen, that's domain knowledge that an end user lives and breathes daily. But you put that procedural against it, and then all of a sudden you do have the true human in the loop, where it is now decision back to first principles. What is it we're trying to solve and work with, versus perhaps what their feeling was like, keep trying to figure out which one to go after. Guess what? You now can choose your own model, which one you want to use based on the structure, and then build, training against that. And I think constantly trying to wait for the next one is the worst idea. I try them all. Continue to realize what works best for you, but focus on the content that is unique and different, that makes you different as a company. So you're not in this tech race of consuming the latest.
What's interesting about what you said, Jay, is on that second piece of that value chain that I stepped through around extraction, what we do, say before it goes into Q2, is, to your point, we do multi-LLM voting to get to the highest degree of accuracy, because each use case, actually different documents within each use case are best fit for certain models. And so we're model like sovereignty, we would say. And so we allow you to plug in your own model, and then we bring our own there. But basically, like the model score will determine like which path this document should take. It gets sort of put into
And that's actually a great thing you just mentioned, is the independence for that auditability of a model, that if a customer is using their own, but you have a quote unquote third party that might be just making it up, like an equivalent of like a SOX audit kind of comparison, you have an independent voice to it, which actually creates strength as an independent third party in the process. So when people come to audit this, they're like, wait a minute, it's not just yours, but it's the vendor also giving an independent score. That's pretty cool.
That's right.
So both of you inspire teams to sort of look at the product. And when you look from a reliability perspective, what does reliable enough look like for in the context of AI scaling now?
So I can take it multiple ways. So let me say about inspiring our product teams at Octave. I think about it in a few principles. One is you have to unlearn as much as you're going to learn, because your recency bias is so strong of how you think things have worked from a workflow and a process, and why data exists the way it does. To, if you think AI first principles, just in the sense of what work needs to be done and how would I use an agent as a teammate, and actually building the model efficacy and the trainability of that, so that you're making it much more personalized, back to the hyper-personalization, versus I just use it as a co-pilot that is just augmenting my data. That's really no value. So that is one aspect of helping our teams understand that, like, roles are collapsing. Whether you're in design, PM, engineering, everyone can be a builder. I do it. I spend days goofing around building it, AI Studio or Bolt or Replit, just to show how fast you can take an idea to concept. So one big thing is, back to the reliability aspect of things, is some people spend so much time saying, I have to get it right before I can ship it. And we all know West Coast, Silicon Valley ways, ship what you have and iterate. Now, on the reliability aspect of it, when the industries that we care for, it matters tremendously. So I always try to think about it in two parts. So that second piece is just making sure that the data efficacy of what we build from what you're going to present to a customer is accurate, has some tolerance parameters to what might be inaccurate. But don't wait until it's entirely perfect, because we're shipping at a speed and a velocity we've never seen before, and we need to. But that will force us continuously to ask those why questions of how could you build differently versus being constrained with the products you have today.
Yeah, so building on that, and a couple points. One is the growth mindset that you said.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have to, I love that what you said around like you have to unlearn as much as you learn, because you very quickly can get into that confirmation bias. You're not willing to unlearn. And then specific to the software environment that I lived, my life in, is there's a tremendous wave right now and a change in terms of like how value is accruing.
Yeah.
And it's less traditional, SaaS, software as a service, because that was 20 years ago, and it's obviously found its way into the enterprise right now as a mainstay. But there's a new layer that's being developed with this latest AI innovation. It's called the agentic layer.
Mm-hmm.
And the agentic layer is displacing some SaaS. And SaaS was almost like there's less customization that you do. You can configure it a little bit, but you really like had a decision engine
Yeah.
that told you here's how the process goes.
Yeah.
And with an agentic, it's much more fluid in that these AI agents contextually understand,
Yeah.
but they contextually understand as much as gets to the reliability. They contextually understand the process and what they need to do based on the inputs that you've
Yep.
given it, which are your operating procedures,
Yep.
any regulatory guidance, any compliance, any
Yep.
previous inspections or future inspections that you will be held to. Like all of that needs to be fed into the AI agents, so that way they can stay on the rails as they do their work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's real important around the reliability, which is, I think, the value that AdLib really tries to add is that accuracy layer on the front end. But we're deploying agents as well. And so our accuracy layer, like we're drinking our own shampoo, and we let's say eat our own dog food, etc. So we drink our own champagne, and then we put the accuracy layer on the agents that we're deploying to make sure that those agents are reliable for our enterprise customers.
Nice.
Anything you want to add in terms of traceability and defensibility of values?
I think it goes back to kind of what we talked about in the beginning, that the traceability is essential, because what's evolving to this, we think of a knowledge graph. It just simply brings relation against entity and assets, and being able to then cull through that and question it. And therefore applications get built up and burnt down based on the questions that are being created. The traceability and the lineage is essential. So if I wanted to look back on something that was designed 30 years ago and knowing that I had to make a retrofit on this, but if I didn't have access to that information, I may be down a very costly exercise of retrofitting a part of a building or an infrastructure that I could easily have alleviated if I just had that lineage. So it's important that every one of these changes that happen, that you can come back to a source artifact. So back to this auditability, the traceability of that is essential. It helps anyone who's going to do things multiple times over. So as a large EPC, you don't just build one and you're done. You're going to do it for hundreds of times, for hundreds of clients. And the repeatability and learning of that, the underlying traceability, not only for learning and knowledge, but from a regulatory perspective. And frankly, I think one of the most powerful things is the capture of tacit knowledge. Because we have so many people, and we joked, as I said in one of the forums here, we have a lot of people that are on the retiring side, and then versus the younger group. But the advantage that the older tenured workers have is context. They've been through it a number of times as patterns. And so being able to capture that tacit knowledge for the next generation coming in helps that apprenticeship get even squeezed faster. So that's kind of how I look at it.
So all of that, and what I would add is around the defensibility. I think most executives know, especially in regulated industries, this is just new technology, but I have to get to the same end state as I've always been, which I've got to prove out my worth at the end of the day. I do think you can draw a parallel in terms of evolution of technology and what we're doing right now around defensibility to say cloud 20 years ago,
Yeah.
there was rightfully so hesitation around moving workloads to public cloud.
Yes.
Where did we end up at the end of the day? Today, we're in a hybrid cloud environment. Most enterprises have hybrid cloud due to, data sovereignty, sensitivities of, and that makes sense. My sense is as CPOs and CEOs adopt the AI technologies, especially with this agentic orchestration workflow and being able to defend these AI agents, so these digital workers now, I think McKinsey just came out and said they have now 65,000,
Right. Yeah.
25,000 digital workers and 40,000 physical workers. 5 years from now, I think that's going to be commonplace.
Yeah.
It may sound like interesting now. I think it's going to be commonplace.
Yeah.
So to trust those digital workers to defend the work that they're doing,
Yeah.
I think is going to sort of require this hybrid type approach where you are going to have models, applications still on-prem
Yep.
in your private data.
Yeah.
But you're also going to have like public models working it for you.
Yeah.
And so that's the architecture that we've worked against in order to, at the end of the day, allow our customers to be able to defend the work that they're doing.
I think an interesting parallel, because I always interchange between the human and the agent. If it is a true coworker that is doing work in addition to you, but just at hyperscale, as you manage a company, you too have to have traceability when it comes to employment, how an employee is managed, pay, healthcare, all these things have a traceability element to make the organization continue to run functionally. So treat the agent no different than a hired digital labor, but realizing that traceability is at a scale that we've not yet seen, because the interactivity of those agents is far greater than we've seen of, company performance yet today.
Yeah, so in a previous life, I used to run an automation practice at Deloitte. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
One of the customers, and this is public, was NASA. And what NASA did from their shared service center is that they brought us in. We deployed a number of RPA vendors in NASA in their shared service center to handle HR, finance, and some operational pieces. The workers, the employees, were concerned at first that they were going to be dismissed. What ended up happening, though, to your point, is the employees, let's just say a financial analyst, that financial analyst became a financial bot manager.
Yeah.
They were managing a digital work.
They were orchestrating it. Yeah.
And so they had to care and feed those digital workers,
Yeah.
almost like they had a real, physical employee base there.
Yeah.
Are they showing up? Are they doing the right job?
Right.
Am I elevating them appropriately because the work changes? Or am I changing like how they do their work?
Yeah. I think this is a fascinating piece of where the market's going and how you value work, whether it's human form or agentically digital form, and doing that together. Because something I was saying in the lunch session is when you become an orchestrator of work across agents and teams, you are truly working at high performance. And that's the opportunity that I think most organizations need to embrace versus, is this going to change and take away my job? It's going to take away work that has that remedial aspect that's going to actually force you to be far more impactful in the next layer of work. We've just seen this in history. So to me, that's an awesome combination.
Absolutely. And I have a feeling that this conversation could carry on for hours.
Well, I think we're perhaps. I'm passionate about what I do.
I can tell. I as well.
We would like to invite both of you to be on our World Manufacturing Day coming up online. So minimal investment, couple hours of time. But I'd like to close with perhaps one last question. What should platforms like Octo build versus partner?
Ooh, great one. So as I would say, a lot of the data technologies, frankly, will be commoditized. The intelligence or the context of how that information is formed is absolutely core to what we do, because we understand the domain, we understand what our customers do and how they deliver value for their customers. We will always be in that chain, if you will, chain of custody or chain of alignment. So for us, it's really building the agentic knowledge layers that allow us to manage those use cases. Where we have to be better to partner with is folks like yourself and others, because we have to realize it in the context of our customer. They buy many solutions. What they don't want is a headache of having to integrate all these solutions. Right. They want an outcome. They want a flow that works. So we are and will be launching the Octave Technology Partner Ecosystem that will help to scale our technology partners and working with us as we work with our customers versus us simply just providing solutions as Octave itself. And the second part is working deeply with service providers, as you mentioned, Deloitte and other SIs, because that is trust in the ecosystem where they're winning and they're focused on value. They're focused on the workflow. They're focused on use cases that drive economic value for customers. So we want to be able to shift ourselves in enabling a partner ecosystem that can hopefully scale with and around Octave.
That's right. And like a mental model I use to hopefully make sure that my company stays focused is basically we do core things and then it's easy to get pulled into non-core. And the non-core is where you should have partners.
Yes.
And so our core is that accuracy layer, period. We should not be trying to go into core applications like you provide core applications. We should sit on like the front end and then the auditability of that, input on the back end for post-processing. I think that's how we best partner with companies like Octave moving forward. What I would also say is that for customers, what I start to see with customers is that they have an expectation around that frictionless buying experience that you mentioned, Jay. And so what we're trying to do from a provider perspective, and I don't want to get too technical. Well, I can get technical, but like with these digital agents now that are being deployed in the core platform, but having protocols like MCP and A2A that allow, basically it's the new age API. And it allows frictionless like work between our technologies that the end customer doesn't even really need to know about. They don't need to see it. So it's hidden from them, but it allows our partnership, like the best of our partnership, that 1 + 1 = 3, to shine through and deliver for the customer.
I fully agree. This is great. I mean, I think there's like immediate opportunities for us collectively because as you describe with what you're driving is not only that pre-processing, but also the auditability on the outside. Because an essential piece, if you think about as software providers, especially in the AI age, is that traceability and auditability that is not ours, but is validated by someone on third party. And you have to think about those processes no different than we did with Sarbanes-Oxley and financial auditing. There's a reason why there's third-party engagement. And so I don't see that being any different, and that helps us to scale our platform and our portfolio. But I think as we talked about, it's in the service of our customers that do great things for a lot of things that we, take for granted in life, on the built infrastructure and food and safety and the like. It's good to scale.
Thank you both for your insights and look forward to seeing how this partnering accelerate the customer outcomes and the progress in the future. Hope to host you soon again.
Yeah. Thank you.